Hey guys, what's up? In today's tutorial, we'll be making Carrom pool by Miniclip. So we look into the game mechanics of that game. So yeah, let's get started. In my asset folder, I have all my sprites ready. So I'll just drag my Carrom board to our scene and let me just scale it down. As we are aiming for a mobile phone kind of ratio, so I'll just scale it so it looks good for a phone device. Alright, next I'll just drag a striker to our scene view, and again I'll scale it and place it on our. I'll just move it down in y axis. Okay, so let me just scale it a bit more. Alright, now as you can see, the image doesn't look that crispy, so we have to resize that image, but right now we can work with this. As the image size is really large, so but I'd resize it later on. Now in the actual game, there is a slider below the carom board which moves our striker left and right. So I'll do the same thing. I'll go to UI and first I'll add a canvas, and let's, for our scale mode, let's do scale with screen size, and next let's add a slider. Let's go to UI and slider. Okay, so I'll change the placement of the slider. I'll move it just below the carom board. Okay, so it looks great now, but the default images of this slider doesn't look nice, so I'll be changing the images, and we won't be using our fill aspect, so I'll be deleting that. Now let's go to our handle, and for our handles image I'll just choose our striker, and for the background I have another image ready, which, alright, but let's scale this background in our y-axis, and I'll change its alpha value so it looks better now. Yeah, okay, now I'll change the minimum value to -1 of a slider so the handle can be placed in the middle. Now if you'd see our striker's x value, the maximum and minimum we want it to move. For the maximum it's around 1.2, yeah, 1.2, and for minimum it's -1.2. So I'll go to our slider and I'll change its minimum and maximum value to 1.2 and -1.2. For maximum it would be 1.2, and for minimum -1.2. Now we can make our first script. So I'll go to our striker and make a new script. I'll name it striker controller. Alright, let's open it in Visual Studios. Okay, so I won't be using our start and update right now. So let's make our own function. I'll name it void striker x position. Striker x position. I'll use a namespace UI, so it's Unity engine.ui, and in here we'll be giving reference to our slider. So serialized field, slider, striker, slider. All right. In our start, in our start, I'm gonna do is striker slider dot on value changed dot add listener, and the listener we'll be adding would be this striker x position. Okay, so I'll have to get a float value, which would basically be the float value of our slider value. I'll just name it value. Okay, so it shouldn't show any error if you passed a float value as in our function. Okay, now simply what I can do, I'll just say transform dot position equals to new vector 3. For x value it will be value, and for y and z it will be 0. So let's go back here. Let's give reference to our slider. I'm gonna save. Let's start a scene. So it's moving, it's doing what we want it to do, but it's changing our y value because my actual y value is minus 0.9. So instead of 0 over here, we'll just do minus 0.9f, and it should work perfectly now. Okay, so it's working just like we want it to work. Yep. All right. And now, so what this basically does is whenever the value of a slider will be changed, we add a listener, and it's calling this function striker x position, which basically can be done in your slider over here as well on value change. I was going to do it this way, but it's just easy to do with one line of code. So yeah, now what we want to do is that we start a raycast from our mouse position, and when we'll drag, our striker should move. Alright, so for that, first thing I'm gonna do, I'll add rigid body 2D to our striker, and we'll remove the gravity scale. So I set the gravity scale to 0, and let's add a circle collider 2D. So yep, so the circle, you can see the circle collider is this small green line. Alright, so this is our collider. Let's change the radius to yep, so okay. So at this point it can collide with other objects like the Carrom disk that we'll be adding later on. I'll just add one or two of these in a scene so we can test setup, and added these disks, and I've selected all these disks as you can see, and I'll add the circle collider to all of these. Okay, alright, and we'll be adding rigid body 2D as well. So this one is the red one. I'll do the same for this as well. Okay, Let's just save our scene. Okay, so I didn't remove our gravity from these, so I'll make it 0 and 0. Alright, so now it's fine. If I happen to move a striker towards them, you can see it's making a contact with it. But we'll be doing that using a script. So let's head over to a striker controller script. And first thing, what I'll do is I'll check if we click our mouse button. So let's do if input dot get mouse button down at 0 index. So if we do this, then we can start a ray, and this ray will be from our camera position. So physics 2D dot recast and vector2 origin camera dot main dot okay, I forgot. It was uh, screen screen to world point. All right, I think this should either it's this or the screen to ray. Let's try this first. So let's get our input dot mouse position. This will basically give our mouse position to us, and the second parameter will be our direction, for which I'll just say vector 3 dot forward. All right. Okay, everything looks fine. Let's see if we are hitting anything. So if hit dot collider, if we hit anything, okay, so then we can get its name. So I'll just do debug.log hit.transform.name. So if I'll press my mouse button while hovering over our striker, it should debug striker in our console. So yeah, you can see over here it's working. Let's try these. Okay, so we are hitting Carrom disk red, Carrom disk B, and yes, we are hitting striker as well. So this is working. Background image, which will show us the force by which we are moving our striker. Let's say moving our striker. All right, so back in here in our script, I'll give reference to this. Uh, it's gonna be transform. I'll just name it striker background for simplicity. All right. Now in here we can check if hit dot transform dot name equals to striker. Then actually let's make a boolean. I'll name it striker force, as we'll be adding force to our striker. In here is true, striker force equals to true. Now just below it, I'll check if striker force is equals to true, and if that is the case, then our striker background will look towards our hit dot point, which would basically be the hit dot position. Okay, so it's rotating just like I want it to rotate. Okay, so I'll quickly explain this, that our striker has three components now. Three child objects. So the first object is basically just an empty object, and this is the object that's doing all the look at stuff. So I've added 90 degrees to the y-axis, as the look at only works with z-axis. So under that we have two child objects. One of them is this white knob. Towards this knob, our striker will be going towards this knob. Basically we'll be adding force to our striker towards this knob object, this circle object. And then there is just this background image, which would basically be scaled up this way while we move our mouse away from our striker. Vector 2 dot distance between our transform dot position and our hit dot point. This difference will be the scale of our striker background. So let's do striker background dots. It should be local scale. I'll make a float over here. I'll name it scale value equals to distance. And I'll pass scale value for x, y, and z. I think this should work. Now let's do input dot get mouse button up at 0 index. Then we'll be adding the force towards our knob, the force point. This is first. I'll have to give reference to a rigid body for that. In start, let's do RB equals to get component rigid body 2D. Alright, let's make a new transform force point. Alright, force, I'll make it serialize. Okay, on mouse button up, we'll do RB dot add force towards our force point. So force point dot position. All right. I didn't give reference to our force point. Let's go to our striker. Give reference to our force point. Let's start. Let's see if it's working. I should multiply it with some value. This test with 10,000 because why not? Okay, that was like way too much. Not working correctly, but I'll make a boolean back to false and I'll resize this striker back dot local scale to vector 3 dot 0. Instead of adding force towards force point dot position, let's make a new vector 3 and let's do force point dot position dot x, and from this x as our force point is a child object of a striker, so we'll have to subtract transform dot position dot x from this. Transform is basically a striker, as this script is inside our striker object, and we'll do the same thing for our y-axis as well, but instead of x this will be dot y. All right, and comma 0, as we won't be doing anything in z-axis, and we don't want to add force in z-axis either. So now to make everything work, I made this background and gave it a nice background image, and I added a huge trigger. So yeah, this trigger is gonna detect our hit dot for our hit dot point. So let's start and I'll show you guys that. You'll see I can move my striker. I'll restart. I'll change the X position, maybe somewhere here. And you should see, even though we'll have to change some physics to our strikers and our disc, but for now this looks great, I guess. I just need to clamp the scale. Finally, I added some linear drag to all our disc and striker, and that clamped the scale for this to 3, so the scale won't increase more than 3, and this is how it looks.